Welcome to the 10-Minute Life Coaching Program. My name is Jay Cleveland Payne. I train people for improved personal and professional development, offering my assistance for those ready to develop their goals into tangible, focused, and achievable plans of action. And this podcast is one tool I use to complete my mission. How it works: in 10 minutes time of this podcast, I'll present for you a life lesson that you can use to work instantly in improving your personal or professional development life. It's that simple. It'll be a quick lesson you can take right now and implement into your workflow immediately. And that lesson will sound to you like it's very familiar because maybe it's something you're already trying to implement. That's just a way to reinforce that the plan of action you're working right now is a good plan. Just a plan that may need a little extra time and work to get to where it needs to be. I can help you out possibly with that. Check out the website 10minutelifecoach.com for more ways that I can help you season that idea and that plan of action. Now, today I'm getting really personal, and I didn't really want to, but it's a topic that just sort of makes sense to where my life is right now, and it's specifically where my wife is right now. For those of you who don't know, who don't follow me in other venues, in my personal venues, I am going through a serious issue with my household. And the serious issue is the fact that my wife is going through treatments for stage 3 breast cancer. Now, at this point in time, she is fine. The cancer was found well enough that we had enough time to deal with it. She had surgery. It was successful. Right now, she's dealing with some side effects of surgery, and she's having some delays in getting into her next step into phase of recovery. So she's not out of the woods yet completely, but everything is looking good and should be fine on the way to a full path of recovery. However, on top of all the other things that we were going through at the time, and then the diagnosis came and became our diagnosis because we dealt with it as a family, the story of my wife and what she was going through and all the struggles that sometimes were tragic, sometimes were sad, and honestly, sometimes were hilarious. Watching her go through what she was going through reminded me of me going through some of the issues I had a few years ago with my health scare, where it was seemingly ridiculous that I was putting myself in this predicament, and here I was, and all the work it took to kind of get back to a state of normal, and then after that, all the work it took to forget I needed to be in a state of normal and do all the right things. The funny thing about life is that your life is a very interesting thing you go through to you, and if you're one that has something that's pretty profound, at least to you, you feel the need to share the story with others, your life can be a lifesaver to someone else. Something you didn't do that you caught in time and you tell someone about it will have someone think twice about doing the same thing because they may put themselves in a similar situation and they may realize the back end isn't so great. Something you did do that may have done something similar, saved your life, did something great, meant something spectacular to someone else that someone else is afraid of doing, may give them the confidence to step up and do what they need to do that grand thing. In the case of my wife, it's a mixed bag because we have been trying, I'll say I have been trying for years to include her into many of my projects I do with podcasting and audio and telling stories on that end. A way to essentially do more time doing stories and have more time to spend with the family is to try to include them into that thing. And she has resisted it pretty much our entire marriage, and she still resists it right now. But she has a story that needs to be told, and today I am not telling that story. And that's the real point to today's lesson. The stories that you tell are your own stories. And as long as you keep the people out of it that need a little protection, you can tell your story all day long to as many people as you want to because it belongs to you. You want to get the message out that lives inside your heart. The things that go through your brain, the words that come out of your mouth belong to you. And only you essentially will suffer the consequences, assuming you tell the story correctly and keep the right people out of the story, of course. Now, my wife's story, it's a great story. It's an awesome story. It's just an amazing story of what all the things she's gone through. But my wife is my wife and not me. So while I can tell bits and pieces of our story or her story from my perspective, I don't have the rights to tell the full story without her permission because it's not my story. It's her story. It's very sacred. It's very special. And it's growing more and more powerful as she works on how she's going to actually present her story on a more consistent basis. It's just amazing how when someone goes through something really big and it touches your life, you want to go out there and spread the word out to others, but you really can't because you can't tell other people's story. This is a very similar situation to a coworker I had who went through a serious health scare of her own. I can tell you the basics of it. She had 2 brain aneurysms in the span of about 9 months. One just came upon her, and then she was, gone. She survived it. Everything was fine. And then months later, she was dealing with some different side effects that didn't seem right. She went in for just a checkup to see what it might have been, to find out she was having another brain aneurysm and was having surgery immediately to take care of that. Now, many people, including myself, have told her, have just begged her that she needs to find a way to get her story out. In fact, before the brain aneurysms, I was working with her to try to get her to write a book on basically her life story at that point. An amazing story of being a single mother and getting through a whole lot of adversity to be where she was and be a big name in our market for media. And she just didn't want to do it. In fact, she would even say, like, it's amazing how I was sitting there seeming like I was just putting out books every single weekend, and she just couldn't get her act together to do it. And she hadn't got together. I don't want to say she didn't get her act together, but because that's putting words in her mouth. But she hasn't quite gotten around to doing something with the story from surviving the brain aneurysm. And trust me, I'm not the one pushing at this point. There are other people and other storytellers and other authors and publishers who are begging her to let them help her get the story out there. Now, it's a great story. Her story is awesome. My wife's story is amazing. But I can only tell the bits and pieces from my end and my experience for both those ladies. And that's fine because that's how life works. It's their life. I don't own the rights to their life. I'm not trying to make a big time production. And if I had the money to pay them, I'm sure my wife would look at me kind of funny. Why would you be paying your wife to tell a story you already hear? And my friend would just kind of look at me funny just because it just seemed like just a waste of time and money in its sense. But these are 2 people that have amazing stories that belong to them and they are sacred. I don't have the rights to tell their story because they are sacred. They tell their stories in similar ways, bits and pieces right now. They're not on stages and doing long form talks and keynoting anything and writing books or whatever and blogging and all that stuff. But they do tell what they can tell, and they tell it the way they want to. And that's fine and dandy because it's up to them to tell the story of themselves the way they want to. Now, one of the things that gets me frustrated about a lot of public speakers, and especially a lot of personal development type speakers, is they basically steal someone else's story and use it not so much as their own, but use it to puff up their platform. And that's something that really, really bothers me because it's not theirs. You can use it as a reference. You can use it as a quick opening. Use it as some way to get into something. But they basically take someone else's brand new thing that everyone else is into and turn it into something they can use to pull in eyeballs. You don't have the right to steal anyone else's lines. You don't have the right to tell someone else's joke. You don't have the right to spill out the facts to anyone else's story when they don't want that story told or when they want to tell it in their own way. Stories you tell about others are sacred. They're very important to them. They should be very important to you. You can tell as much story as they allow you to tell, and you can tell the story from your perspective all day long, but you cannot give away the plot points for their story because it's theirs. They're actually still living it right now, and that's part of the reasons and sometimes part of the problem. Sometimes when you live in the story, it's hard to get a good conclusion when it's still in progress, and it's hard to really put a cap end on it. Let them figure it out. Let them do it when they want to. And you work on shoring up some of those holes in your own story that probably need plugging up. And that's this edition of the 10-Minute Life Coaching Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on the journey. I am so glad to have you along the ride. As I said inside the lesson, those of you who have followed me in some of my other personal writings sort of know the story of what's going on. My wife dealing with cancer. She had her surgery. Everything is A-okay on that end. There's still some complications because when you get cut on, there usually are complications. But she is doing well, and she thanked everyone who send their regards via me here, and she would gladly do that as well. But as the message here said, it's her story, so I can't really go big detail into what she wants to talk about because she has to want to talk about it. For my story, I have no problem talking about it, and so I'm going to let you in on some insights on what we need here inside of the 10-Minute Life Coach and in all things DBA J. Cleveland Payne. Obviously, cash is an issue. Cash is always an issue when you're running a business. And this podcast is not just a mission for mission's sake. It also is a mission for just sustaining itself and becoming a self-sustaining business on its own. And it's slowly and surely after time becoming something that is gaining a bit more in the way of spare change to keep it going. But money is an issue, and so as far as I'm concerned, don't think that I'm begging for money right now, but we are making more headway into getting things working so that you can help support this mission and other missions inside of the podcast and my other writings as well. Now, the best way to always find out what exactly it is we're needing, we're pushing, we're talking about is to go to the main website, my main website, jclevelandpayne.net. Check it out, and you can see all the things going on there. Right now, we're in a big flux of getting a lot of written material turned into actual books and things that can be shared and things that make sort of sense. So you'll see a lot of just kind of randomish book releases, some quick Amazon books, some 99 centers, and some really quick reads popping up in the next year, definitely the next year. Recently, we published book 3 finally of the Welcome to Your Monday series, and book 4 is being worked on right now with a very creative title of Welcome to Your Monday Book 4, because I'm out of book names, to be honest. So a lot of things we've been doing over a while, a lot of things I've been writing for literally 20 years, recycled into things that are fresh, that are new, that are relevant, and into words that can be purchased so that you can help keep these things going. Also, we've talked in previous episodes about the $10 Life Coach. Its date could be anywhere since these things are kind of recorded ahead of time. But the purpose is to create a community for $10 a month that will be a mastermind of sorts where we will mastermind together and take care of each other. And if there's any big releases that I do, 10-Minute Life Coach or other coaching-wise, I'll give you guys first dab at it just like that. That's going to be pretty cool. We also are going to set up some Patreonage. So if you are a fan of Patreon or a fan of me and willing to use Patreon, there'll be links, there'll be calls to action to go to Patreon and support this thing. There'll be a $10 tier that will give you essentially everything you get from the $10 Life Coach. In fact, that may be where the $10 Life Coach lives, like inside of Patreon, plus some other ways to get a little extra work for a little extra coinage, and that will help keep the lights on here and keep things going as well. So I don't need you to feel sorry for me or to pity for me, but I am trying to run a business. I am trying to give you value. Let me know if the value is worth it, and let me know if you have any suggestions of how I can, extra monetize this thing here by not dropping in big time sponsors or insertion roles. You've heard some roles in the beginning, some ads at the beginning and end of the podcast, but nothing's going inside and no real sponsors going in, and we're still trying to keep it that way because that's sort of the integrity of the show. The best way you can help me that costs you except a little time is listening to the podcast, subscribing to the podcast, sharing it with friends, and talking about it with some folks who may be like-minded, giving me a rating and review wherever you get your podcast from, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, wherever you get it. Or if you use a specific app, let me know what app that is so I can make sure that your experience is optimized for said app. You get the best experience you can from whatever thing you want to use, because it's all up to you. Once again, my main website is jclevelandpayne.net. Check it out, and you can see what other a grand, not so grand, or just kind of out there projects we have going on for the entirety of J. Cleveland Payne Enterprises. And be here next week for another great edition. I'm just going to straight up say we do great work here. So another great edition of the 10-Minute Life Coach Podcast.